Yeah, no, it sounds great.
I'm just going to start, and I don't know if I'm as clever as Ted King, but I'm going to tell you a little bit how I came to know you from my opinion and the genesis for me, just from a selfish point of view, is we have a friend in common, Matt Ryan, and you and I were like
Uh,
ships in the night
Great.
because you were on your way out from the national team as I was coming back from the US, and we're the same age, so it's not like you'd finished with the sport for because you'd gone on with it. But we just missed each other. And the whole time I was away, Maddie was telling me about this, Wurfy that. And then you ended up going to the Olympics as a 21-year-old and then became a professional cyclist. And you've since gone on to win international Ironman, top five at the Ironman World Championships. You've cycled in cycling grand tours, the Tour of Spain, Giro d'Italia. So, right, yeah, Maddie was right. Like you were decent at the time, and you've since gone on to do a thing or two. So at the time, I was a bit like, who's this bloke that I've never met that I'm just keep hearing about? And um, I'm still interested. So I want to know a little bit about, how you plan to get better at the thing you're doing now, but also how we got here. So you started rowing at school in Tassie at Hutchins. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's great. I just love it that you bring up Maddie. And I mean, if you're happy to elaborate a bit on that
Oh yeah.
for them, just like I think the importance of that person that you go through all this stuff with, like you have your team, you might have your crew, but you often have a guy, for us, it's a guy that you just do more with, like you
Sure.
really get most out of yourselves. And you guys have rode together at Junior Worlds from
No, we
memory.
were we went to school together,
You went to
and
school, maybe
yeah,
growing for Kings, and
yeah.
up at Lake Wivenhoe. I remember you beating Friends, which was from Tasmania. I wasn't in the boat, but the guys I went to Junior Worlds with were in the boat. And yeah, you beat Scott Brennan on the rowing machine that year, and that was like a big talking point, as a
Huh.
schoolboy, because Scotty
I
was
mean,
sort
power to weight wasn't going to be that flattering, but I was a big boy at that stage. Did you won
of, yeah,
the single scull at nationals that year?
yeah, I did the single, but Scotty was there, so he won everything.
Okay.
But yeah, I was sort of up there, and then but anyway, so then Maddie, so once I left school, once at Hutchins, but Maddie sort of, we ended up training a lot together. I'd be in Sydney with him, always on the camps. We always kept in touch, and as whenever we'd have time around each other, I mean, it was always around exercise, some type of activity, and we both always had a ute, loved our utes.
Yeah.
But he was just like that guy, and it's funny, like throughout my whole career now, and I just sort of started to think back, and even now, you always try to find that person, to sort of just keep pushing you, and now these guys were a lot younger. The guys that I
Yeah.
find,
Yeah.
and you don't want to feel like the creepy old guy hanging around with the young guys, but I genuinely have great, and I think now about Drew or James, like how they take us under their wing, and they're a lot older than us, and we never thought that would creepy or weird, but
No.
that we looked at them with so much respect. We wanted to try and learn from them. We wanted to try and beat them in anything we could, which was definitely nothing on the water, but off the water.
And Jimmy is
Because
so good at everything off the water too.
that's a problem.
Basketball,
Yeah,
tennis, golf. He just one of those
yeah,
guys where he picks it up and he's just almost automatically really good at it.
yeah.
Annoying.
Yeah, and so I've just always kind of had, with cycling. I guess when I was in Italy, it was Ivan Basso, and then sort of later, Richie Port, and then here in Andorra, um, I guess we've had different guys with the team, but we had, I mean, obviously there was Froomey and Geraint for a longest period there,
Yeah.
and then yeah, Pavel Sivakov, a young kid, came to the team, and Tim Kerrison was coaching him, and he was living just down the road in in here in Andorra, and just wait on a second, mate. Hey, Wyatt, I'm gonna have to get organized.
No, do what you need to do.
So you can
Yeah,
edit it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I edit it.
You're right, mate.
Yeah, so there was Pavel, and then now more recently just doing Ironman. I mean, there's been other guys. You know, Josh Tarling was a bit of a young guy that came through the team, and I spent a lot of time in the last couple of years. But now it's Hayden Wild, you know, who just got silver at the Olympics in the Olympic distance. So just so much better than me at running and swimming particularly, but luckily on the bike, you know, it's an area where I can contribute to his performance by pushing him. But you know, we hang out a lot. You know, it's more like a rowing mentality. You know, like we spend a lot of time together and doing stuff, and you just realize like that having that person to lean on, you know, is so crucial. You know, for me anyway, and I
Yeah.
think going for like rowing to get the most out of yourself. And Matty Ryan was definitely like, you know, one of the first guys that I ever had like that, and taught me the importance of that. You know, and like the
Just,
brethren.
yeah. Yeah. Matt, you and I have that in common with Matt, and just to fill the listener in, because we could be having any range of person listening to this, is we're talking about Matt Ryan, who Olympic silver medalist in the men's four from Beijing. He is also the other half of the one remaining world record I share. He and I did 24 hours on the erg, 20-minute rotations for a full day. I think the split from memory was 153.6, may have been 153.8. So that Matt Ryan, and a personal anecdote on the property I live at, when we walk out to the front, like when I'm talking, like walk out with my little bloke. So
Yeah,
we'll walk out to the gate. Everyone has to touch the gate in my family. I call it the Matt Ryan special, because if you walk out there and think that you've done it without actually, you know, touching it, it doesn't count. And those little details with Matt, he's a stickler for, and
mm.
I think someone around nearby that helps you. You know, you got to be prepared to set the tone, but if someone else has set the standard as well,
Yeah.
then that really can support you on your mission. It seems like you've over time had a who's who of people to not only train with, but to learn from. And what, like, as you've gone into more and more solitary sports, what percent of the time are you training with someone versus solo at the moment, given that you have your own race calendar and family and all that stuff to
Yeah,
juggle?
yeah. Well, I guess probably I'd say 50% still. It seems, which is probably quite a lot, but it doesn't seem like that much, I guess, because often on the bike you're rarely alone, which is the long period. You know, when I'm training for an Ironman, for example, as opposed to just pure cycling, you know, the if you're swimming or running, if you're on your own, doesn't you know,
Yeah.
there's times when it's great having someone there to push you, but generally sort of just getting, you know, doing the session, you know, they're obviously a lot shorter than hours on the bike. So yeah, I'd say it'd be as high as 50%. You know, I'm probably alone, but it sort of feels like I'm only alone for 10% because you
Yeah.
kind of have that person around you when you want it or when you need it, you know, when there's that need to have that, you know, pushing each other apart. And which is, I guess, a lot different to rowing, where we're pretty much always all together for, you know, 100% of the time, especially if we're at the institute or something.
Yeah, especially when you're
Um,
not good enough to row the single for your country,
yeah.
which most of us aren't. So you end up
Mm.
having to row with other people. In the boat that I was most fond of, you end up rowing with quite a few people. So you're going to be around people, but I tend to have spent most of my time recently training by myself. So I'm, curious
Mm.
as to what people, need, but need is just the other side of what benefits the most, which makes it most sustainable over time. And you'll be doing this a while.
Yeah, I think identifying what you need to be pushed at, and then, you know, but obviously having, you've got to go out and race on your own, so you have to have the ability to
Yeah.
make yourself get it done too. But it's not a weakness to say, oh, look, for this, like, I really need someone there. You know, I just can't sort of, yeah, get myself to the level that I know I can if I'm with someone else. You know, like swimming, for example, you know, I definitely can go and swim. And if I'm just trying to swim properly and do some drills and just hit some marks, but if you're really trying to work hard in the pool, there's nothing like having someone faster.
Yeah.
It's funny how everything I do always goes back to rowing. I mean, we were at the moment, I think I said to you before we started this, like I'm really doubling down on my swimming. I mean, it's something I haven't actually done, which might be contrary to what people would imagine, with where I've got in the sport. But the timing of it just sort of hasn't worked. I mean, the coaches that I had, that Tim Kerrison, had access to early on, like Dennis Cottrell, it was in Australia and I was in Europe. So it was like, when can we slot in a couple of weeks here or there? And being so skill based, I mean, you just sort of forget everything. And I'd kind of survive swimming well enough to hack through the sport and obviously get to where I've got, but we've never actually taken or had the environment. And I just sort of stumbled across a guy here in Andorra who has actually worked with Javier Gomez, who was one of the most successful Olympic distance guys, and then
Yeah.
Jan Frodeno, for the last few years of his career, directly. And he just happened to move to Andorra, and I just ran into him, and he, obviously knew me and said hello and asked me about my swimming. And I said, it's something I really need to work on. He said, well, I'd love to help you and with that. So he swims with me.
Oh.
And in the first day, for example, I mean, we swam for 3 hours, and I think I swam 300 meters because he stopped me every time I made a mistake. And it was just mind-boggling to see, how much. I mean, you always hear about feel and connection, and obviously coming from rowing, you feel like you have a pretty good understanding of that, but you're in the water, not on top of it. So there's a difference there. You don't have articles to help you get to where you're going, being an oar and a slide and whatever else.
Yeah.
And so just going back to basics and learning all that. And, it's been a couple of weeks now, and we're in the gym and we're doing stuff. I mean, man, like muscles in my shoulders I never knew I had, and my back. And I mean, I thought I was quite a good athlete. I mean, coming from rowing in that background, I've always prided myself on, particularly the people that I'm surrounded by. I'd call myself an athlete, not a cyclist, not a triathlete, not a rower. Yet this was just a real eye opener to, the level of another sport if you want to get very good at it. And I find myself just constantly, we're talking about, getting the most out of the finish, like that last little bit. And that sort of drives the other shoulder forward, because I get all like this. And I stopped him. I said, yeah, gosh, I remember watching Drew Ginn and James Tompkins row, and they had this like brief pause at the finish where they were just getting that last bit. But if you watch the boat, it's just as they pulled the oar, just took off. It was just like, and I just, like, swimming coaches keep talking about accelerating through, and because I'm not connected enough, I've never felt that. I've never been able to get that feeling. And so I guess my point here is it's such a foundational sport that, I mean, I think anyone that does it, particularly at our level and the amount of time we do it, the amount of our life that it takes up in those developmental years, it's very hard not to draw on those experiences.
From rowing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it teaches you a lot about everything.
Yeah. It's very formative, and it's if you get into it when a lot of us did, which is in teenagers, in schools where it's seen as relevant, and it's a great sport if you finds you and you kind of, either going through puberty or just on the other side of it, you're kind of a maniac and you want to get better at whatever the thing is. It's a great sport for that, because it'll take up a ton of your time, and everyone's terrible to begin with. So you can get better, and then you learn about a lot through that experience. And I draw from that now. It's kind of impossible to imagine how it could be any other way.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, and I guess, that's. I was thinking about. I was actually, before we came on, and you talk about like where you start with it. Like you said, you kind of start with it in school, and I mean, I was at Hutchins in Tasmania, and I was very lucky that there was a very good group of young guys that were taking it very seriously at a very young age. I was one of those guys on the other side, as in before puberty. Like, I was very underdeveloped. Like you remember Hugh Edwards, for example, and Scott Brennan, we already mentioned. They were big, strong kids. but by the time you saw them at 18, they were already like that since I was 13
When
or
when you
14.
were when you were at school, I mean, you were in the first eight, and for how many years?
No, I actually never rode in the first state at Hutchins.
No, you and just because I'm a little undersized and late developer at that stage.
I mean, it took me probably 2 or 3 years to get out of the coxswain seat because I was a little guy.
Yeah,
Fought and fought and fought for that till I was probably 15, and then it took off pretty quick once they actually let me get in the boat. I was quite good with the school 15, 16. But back in those days, we had a big issue with our school. Well, with the national team, we're trying to go to the nationals and do different things. And
sure.
and when I look back, I admire the school's policy on it, like that was the priority. But I think because of Scott and Huey and Sam Whaley and these other guys that were setting the bar there, I felt like I had to keep up. And so what they weren't, I mean, they ended up being part of their aid at school at Friends. And I could have gone to Friends and done it, where it was like a program that kind of enabled that, going to the junior world sort of level. But I couldn't then bear to change schools to row. Sam Whaley,
Yeah,
for example, did and had great success. They almost beat you guys, which was a huge thing
yeah.
for Tasmania to have a crew at that level. But no, I never actually ended up rowing for Hutchins just because of,
The
and
circumstance.
yeah, just
Yeah,
circumstance. As I said, initially, I never really got so into any crew because I was like the little guy, and then I kind of got quite good quite quick, so I kind of got better than everyone. But then, so that meant and also at that point, obviously, Friends. Once we got into the first day, they were the best, so our crew wasn't that good. So
yeah, yeah,
it,
yeah.
it's like a better idea for me to focus on my own interests, of trying to make the national team, and obviously the dream of going to the Olympics being pretty close. I mean, it was only a couple of years after I left school that I had to try and make the team. So that really, particularly at like 17,
I'm just trying to
really,
figure out the space of time here between so underdeveloped and you're a lightweight. There's no weight distinctions at that stage. So you're just in with these
juniors.
guys that are fully fledged heavyweight
Yeah,
rowers, and
yeah.
then you must have progressed both in ability but also in aspiration. So how did you go from being an up and comer and not even that really to thinking
No.
that the Olympic Games as a 21-year-old were reasonable? And I know that there was a under 23 World Championship in there, but there's still some pretty big leaps in performance.
Yeah, the and it's so one thing I did do from like 14 to 16. I think we discussed, but my dad was an abalone diver, and he's most of the deckhands that were helped them on the boat were all gym junkies. So dad got into just going to the gym, but I mean, like everything my dad did, he was quite did it properly. He was very meticulous and fastidious with his craft, no matter what he put his mind to, obviously mainly in business, but, if there was anything athletic. And so the gym was, arms one day, back another, legs, chest, shoulders, and,
Pro
5 days.
split.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I was at Hutchins, the uni gym, where all of them lifted was just across the road. So I'd finish school and walk over, and dad and all his mates would be at the gym. And so from 14 to at least 3 years, I put in 5 days a week, splitting it up. And as you know, I was never big. I mean, I was a lightweight. I was still a lightweight, but I was definitely, by the time all of a sudden I was at 16, 17, I was around those guys more. I was as strong as them, but small, and
Yeah.
it was because the movements all properly and I'd done everything. I mean, they started getting injuries, they'd hurt their backs and hurt their ribs. And I guess I just put the effort into the whole body that I just had quite a strong foundation. And
Mm.
without even knowing I was doing it for that reason at the time, it was, well, you say foundation, it really was foundational. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I can never get that back later in your career.
Mm.
And I'm eternally grateful for my dad and, the sort of the, what he showed as a way to do it,
How much do you think
demonstrated.
that was conscious from him, or just like he was training, you were at that age, and
Yeah, I mean, he knew I wanted to, because so if you go before that, we'd met Stephen Hawkins. So and Stephen when he started abalone diving, so he actually leaned on my dad a lot to help him get into the industry and was teaching him where to dive. So Stephen was often at our house, when I was 13, 14, 15, just talking to dad and doing fish stuff.
This is an Olympic
And
gold medalist, just so
Olympic gold,
everyone's, yeah, in the double in
yeah,
92
92.
as
Yeah.
a heavyweight,
20,
but very much as a lightweight.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, a
Yeah.
little guy and phenomenal. He and Peter Anthony. I mean, it was one of the most incredible performances. And I mean, it probably wrecked both of them. They had to go so deep,
Yeah.
being so little against some pretty strong, powerful countries at that time that God knows what they were up to get them going well.
Yeah.
But it did literally did. I mean, it broke Stephen. I mean, a couple of years later, he actually was in the single in Mexico City, knew nothing about altitude, was in the final, was leading, and just blew up and barely finished the race, and never rode again. I mean, it was like just a lifelong chronic fatigue, and that was why
Wow.
he had to find something. That was 95. So 96. He was already at our house, with maps on the table, learning from my dad. Where do I fish? How do I do this? My dad actually stopped at that point because he wanted to be more involved with me as I entered high school. So, he was sort of in a bit of a transition of his own as far as career goes. He'd been quite successful, so he could sort of do what he wanted to do. And so, yeah, Stephen actually bought his dinghy. Like it was very much
Yeah.
Dad was the best at that craft, and Stephen coming in was like, okay, so if I'm going to do this, I need to find the best guy. And luckily for me, it was my dad, and this guy was around, and that family became a huge part of my rowing and my development. And I think to sort of go back and answer your question, then we also started the weights part. Dad knew that it was something that I wanted to do. The Olympics became louder and louder, thing, as I got 14, 15, 16, as it sort of got closer. And well, if you're going to do that, you're going to need a strong body. And
Yeah.
so that's why we did it. And it's sort of, as I said, I never had any standout rowing performances in that period, but I felt like I was always working towards, what's down the road. And then now, like with the swimming, when I spend 3 hours in the pool the other day and go 300 meters because, the coach is stopping me every every stroke because I get it wrong. I'm glad I had that experience, though. I realized how important like that foundation is, because that's what you draw upon, in the toughest and the biggest moments, the hardest moments, the times where you really need to perform, and especially maybe when you don't feel great. It's like I always say, like, it's what's important is how you perform on your worst day. I mean, it's great when you have a great day. If you've prepared well, it's almost easy, but it's how you figure it out when things go wrong that really matter. And
Yeah.
and I think that comes down to a long period of time of just doing things properly. And
Yeah.
a lot of people underestimate that. They look for the quick, oh, do it for a year. Oh, I've done it for a year and it's just not getting me anywhere. It's like, well,
Oh, a
funnily
year.
enough,
Some people think like do this in 6 weeks or 12 weeks, or
yeah,
it's like, let's move out the time horizon and then think in terms of what might be achievable in a decade. You can
yeah,
probably move the needle quite a bit as opposed to a
yeah.
year or 6 weeks or whatever.
Hmm. It's very hard to, especially in this day and age where we get so much information so quickly and see people doing stuff.
Yeah.
I can tell for people it would be much harder than in our generation when, like I said, you didn't even know who I was. I didn't even know of you at that age. I mean, we're so far all apart on different planets. We'd see each other once a year at the nationals. Oh, who's that name? But, you might hear the odd bit. Pete, as I said, you were quite infamous because of your own machine scores, and that sort of definitely filtered through the network, of coaches in Australia. But that was how information got distributed back in
Yeah.
those
Let
days.
alone information on how to train. Like
Yeah.
I think
Mm.
of what a benefit would have been to learn Olympic weightlifting or just proper powerlifting at a formative age, as opposed to I was a bit like you in terms of like bro training in the gym, because that's all I knew. And I got it from a book an Arnold Schwarzenegger book, because that was, I guess that's how we're lifting weights. How else would you lift weights?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I wonder, when you had Stephen Hawking around, and were you thinking that guy's an Olympic gold medalist, like holy shit, or was it just completely normalized to the point that that's an Olympic gold medalist and he's just a normal bloke, so I could do that too? Was it up on a podium, or was it like I could do that?
Well, it was both. It
Yeah,
was wow,
yeah,
but he's learning from my dad. He's here at the dinner table looking at studying being the rookie. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, I mean, I can learn. He's no different to any other of them. He can't do everything. Yeah, okay, he's very good at
yeah,
he probably do everything related with a boat and an oar and a gym and all this stuff. But he's obviously not Superman. And that was sort of that part that was the bit that gave you the belief, you know. I mean, and I think in Australia, I struggle with that a lot with people is, you know, they sort of think that it's not possible
Mm.
because they can't touch it. You know, they can't, you know, they watch TV and they have fans, whatever, you know, but they think, oh, that's those famous people. That's those really good people, you know, like we can't do that. And parents don't even believe in their kids that they can do that. And yeah, and it's a shame. I mean, it's probably not even just Australia, it's probably everywhere. But I just know that I was very lucky, and I know that ever since that point, you know, you just it's normal to whenever I want to do something, I surround myself with the best people. And
Yeah.
as you and I have discussed in the past, like I mean, when I caught up last time in Portland, I mean, I was there at Nike with Brett Kirby and the guys. I mean, they're the top of the top when it comes to running. And you know, I already mentioned Tim Kerrison, who incidentally was actually coaching rowing back in that period where we were going through under 23s, and then obviously went to swimming, incredible success, and then obviously Team Sky, ridiculous success. Now he's been back at swimming. Surprise, surprise! Australia had their best ever. Finally topped the medal table. I think
Is
in
he back in the
swimming.
system in Australia?
Well, that's the thing. He actually hasn't wanted to work. He's just sort of been helping. But swimming kind of commandeered him. And I guess he with the Olympics, he got the itch, and he was definitely involved extensively with the team. But yeah, he's back on the Gold Coast, and yeah, so I was very fortunate for swimming. I mean, just like a real savant in human performance, and you talk to any coach or anyone about the guy, and he's quite infamous. So yeah, and then obviously the swim coaches he'd exposed me to, and all this stuff. I mean, but it came from a setting very early on that that's just how it's done. And I guess I'm not naive. Obviously, there must be other qualities in the way I am or who I am or what people believe I can achieve that makes these people actually want to work with you. Because at the end of the day, they can work with anyone.
Well, I wonder how much it's if it starts with you and you believe that you can do a thing, and then if there's enough belief from them, and then this has kind of been an upward, like you reckon you could do a thing, you help to get someone to do a thing, then you do that thing, then you can get help from someone to do the next thing, and then upwards and upwards to higher standards and better people. And at each stage, everyone, why wouldn't they believe? Because you've done a bunch
You
of
keep
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty rare. I mean, I keep changing sports, so the bar's quite low because you kind of getting better all the time. But we kind of along the way we've hit all our markers to the point. COVID obviously derailed a lot of things, and that was, I guess, in Ironman a period where I was really on that perfect, like as Nike would say, that perfect trajectory with particularly my running, but also my performance. And I'd been 17th in Kona, then 9th, then 5th, and then COVID. And
Wow.
it did really look like I was on that. And then, which wouldn't have been an issue, but the issue for me was, or not issue, but the reason that kind of got a bit messy there was I started racing on the team.
Mm.
Team Sky, well, was Ineos by then again after 6 years away from bike racing because, well, in COVID year there was no triathlon, so it was a great way to keep fit and
Yeah.
race fit, keep active and keep competitive, and here training with the guys anyway, so it really made sense. And I guess I was more useful than people imagined after that long out, and the fact that I was now a triathlete. That I just have this, you know, okay, if you want a spot on the team and you're happy to do it, it's there. It's yours, and we'll call you in when we need you. And with COVID getting cancelled, and then again in 21, I kind of, I guess, lost that impetus where Ironman was everything. I started, trying to do both. And I did do both. I mean, I was able to win an Ironman. I'm pretty much always on the podium, apart from if I go to Worlds. I'd go race with the team, do my role, we'd win races. I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say that I've proven I can do both sports at that level. But post-COVID, the emergence of Ironman with becoming far more professional, guys really figuring out, particularly what I was doing on the bike. Not that I was doing anything, but like the people around me, the team had invested a lot in my equipment, my setup, aerodynamics, all of that, combined with good physical conditioning. They all caught up with that.
So figuring out how to go fast on the bike.
Exactly. And that's been the big change in the sport. I mean, we've talked about the run being an improvement and all these fast run times. And I kept saying, well, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, what's happening is we're getting a lot of guys riding in a big pack that draft basically off each other. So there's no wind or no elements to make it hard.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are great runners. They can run a 2:20 marathon. So as long as they're not too tired, 2:30s, sort of nothing. And Kona validated it this year. It was a really hard day. And although there was a bunch of them in a big pack, Patrick Langer, who, was the run course record holder in Kona, he only ran he's run 2:30 to preface it in the number of races. He ran 2:38 to win. Magnus Ditlev ran 2:45 to get second. And then I was seventh, but I'd not had the best swim and sort of been on the back foot on the bike. And then there was about 5 of us that ran 2:50. I mean, to think that I was one of the best runners. But it just kind of validated the fact that the sport, the bike's the one that's moved on. Like the swim and the run really haven't changed at all. Like when it's a hard day and you've got to actually push the pedals yourself, that's about the capacity of the athletes at the moment. So, but definitely that evolution on the bike and what you need for that is time. You obviously need to train, but time, you need to test and test and test. I have a team that tests and tests and tests. And I was very blasé about it. I was like the best at it, so I didn't even care. And the next thing, boom, you go to Kona in 22 and Laidlow takes your bike course record and smashes everyone. And he did the same thing to me in 23. And obviously this year he tried the same thing, but then couldn't run. So, it's very much you need to. It's a real professional sport now, I guess is the point. And so. And I kind of got into this mode of, okay, I'll focus on triathlon for a few weeks. Now I've got to do this bike race. And, that's never going to get the most out of you. But then the last sort of 6 weeks, and my performance started dropping, particularly at the world level. At the World Championships, I was really struggling. I'd get up there in the bike, but I just couldn't finish it off in the run. I just didn't have the foundation. So this year was a big to be going the other way again, when I really put my mind to it, and particularly on the run, we worked, Brett and the guys loved it that I was in the US for the 8 weeks leading in or 7 weeks because they could be in touch with me every day. And, it's funny, like I didn't swim well. I didn't ride that bad, but there was more because I was so far behind in the swim. I was just in no man's land. You just don't really know how to apply the effort. But when I, because of my accountability to those guys with my run, I didn't have the same focus on my swim. I was sort of just getting through the sessions and convincing yourself that you're going to be okay. And then sure enough, that caught me out. And once again, it was because I gave myself 6 to 8 weeks to get ready for the big race of the year. Whereas you really need to be thinking about it all year, and if you think about rowing, for you guys or, you talk to Drew or James, it's a 4-year thing to get to the point. And we go back to like everyone wanting everything in 5 minutes, nothing happens like that, it's at the highest level that, all the best people in that sport are trying to achieve or anything in life are trying to get to, it's a process of doing things right for a very long time.
Do you think if you're with your approach to swimming now, and even some of the stuff that you're learning things that are going to add speed and therefore efficiency and improve your performance, and that's available now. So if you think in
Yeah.
terms of I need to do things properly, a bit surely you've been trying to, and yet there's still these evolutions, even if they're
Mm.
just a matter of circumstance. You bumped into a guy that happened to be a very, very good swimming coach for triathletes in the
Yeah.
business.
Well, and he's come at the Olympics himself.
Oh, okay.
And a great story too. I mean, like he took 6 years to lower his PB by 1 second to make the qualifying time. For Spain to go. I mean, so kind of that battler sort
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
really kind of resonated. Like those are the kind of guys that are generally the best coaches. I mean, I'm sure Michael Phelps might be a great coach if he's watching, but it's generally unlikely that guys like, or whether they even want to be. I mean,
Yeah.
they probably they probably don't even want to be for starters, but those other guys that have really like seen every level of the sport, watched the Phelps race when they might have raced the Phelps and just gone, oh my God, how on earth does he go that fast? And
Yeah.
they go, they learn and they study. And, I mean, those kind of people are generally the very, very good coaches. They most often have some sort of attempt at the sport,
Yeah.
and then found coaching and are just, really exceptional at it. And yeah, but it's like, when you say with testing, I mean, everyone says, oh, well, go and do some testing. It's like, yes, but again, that's a process because, I'm going to go to Silverstone next week and do some socks. But until you test those socks, you can't think about what the next socks are. So, really you could have gone last week. And then by this week, we'd already be looking at what. So once you get to one point, it's like, it's not, oh, great, okay, we figured that out. No, no, no. Now it's like back to work. Now we got to get to the next point. And that was what I really can't realize with Ironman. These guys are really just constantly pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And I'm just sort of sitting around, oh, okay, I'll do a bit of training and go and see, I should be right. And
Yeah.
obviously hadn't been right. But, it was great, this Kona, that you take out a bad swim and all of a sudden I'm, one of the top, few guys in the sport still. But also with the opportunity to probably have more runway. I mean, I genuinely believe I've only just started running well. I know where my swimming is very vulnerable. I've probably got the most improvement out of anyone in the sport, if I'm honest, and I'm talking about Ironman triathlon here. I'm not saying I want to go to the Olympics in triathlon where it's a completely different dynamic. But in Ironman triathlon, I genuinely believe of all the guys that I'm racing against, I have the greatest improvement curve, which is pretty nuts at 41. But the facts are the facts. I know how optimized they are with everything they've done. I know what I haven't done. And if you just look at the swim alone, now that I've been fortunate to meet this guy to learn, more about just I guess the nuances of swimming, working with the water. I mean, all the stuff you hear about, but how like 10 coaches can tell you the same thing, but only, well, I mean, 100 could, but one will say it in a way that you get it.
Yeah,
I
mate.
mean,
I've got a great example with someone I remember would have been end of 2000. We were in the first day, been rowing for a few years at that stage, and it was just post Sydney. And
yeah,
Stu Welsh came down, watched
it's
us
true.
in like basically straight from he rolled in a taxi in his
Yeah,
like kit from the night before.
yeah,
It was like
yeah,
in that
no,
post Olympics, and they were silver medalists, so he's
yeah,
feeling pretty good about things. And he
yeah,
watched most of the session, and he said to us, "Yeah, like that's all. You guys are good and everything, but it'd be great if you just out the front put your blade in the water."
yeah,
And it wasn't much more than that, but it was something about either the delivery or the way it landed. But then we did, and it's one of those ones where if you can all do it together, then you actually capture the feeling, and then you notice, oh, that's available, and it might not be accessible every time, but at least you get a taste of
yeah,
the potential, what it might be
yeah.
like. And the swimming seems like it's exactly
Oh,
that. But you've been doing it, you've been doing professional triathlete for how many years now?
yeah. Yeah, since 2017. I mean, but that's the thing. I mean, someone said to me previously about swimming, practice makes permanence. Everyone says practice makes perfect. It's like, well, with swimming, you can do it wrong,
Yeah.
and you'll permanent. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
rowing. You can get really bad at it. And
Ingrained real shit technique.
yeah, and I said to him, the funny thing is, I knew I wasn't doing it right. I mean, I knew as an athlete that I was good enough to be. And sometimes, for example, with a wetsuit, I swam at the front of the race, because of fitness. I
Yeah.
just waved arms over more than anything else. And obviously, Kona, the way I ran through the field, I know I'm one of the fittest guys in the sport. So there's no reason why these guys should swim 4 or 5 minutes faster than me. I mean, of course, I'm capable of sort of figuring this out, but I've not also wanted to apply myself to it because I haven't had the right environment to do it. So I've sort of done what I need to do to get through and sort of known that that's something always up my sleeve. And I mean, this sort of might seem stupid. My sponsors probably hate me for it, for admitting it. But the truth is, I've just done barely enough, to sort of get me through the swim to the point that I feel is acceptable. And that's sort of been it. And
Well, if I go
whereas,
right, it seems like that it's the leg where you can't win it from the swim, but you can lose it.
absolutely,
So you're
you've
just trying
nailed
to
it.
stay thereabouts, and you've
Yeah,
always had a good bike leg. So then it's logically, well, let's work on the run, which is what you've been
yeah,
doing.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
to finish it off.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so anyway, swimming was just like, yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. And I've
Yeah.
always planned to do it. It was just, yeah, I just hadn't had and then of course with the team the last few years, you finish the season, be it Kona or whatever, and then all of a sudden you have a week or two off, and then team camps in December or team meeting and then team camp and then we've got to go and worry about that other sport and then another camp and then it's January and then Gerard and I might go to LA for a training camp, but that's obviously because I'm there with him. A lot of that's on the bike. Again, the swimming is just get into your
Yeah.
swimming for the year,
Yeah.
nice weather, swim outside, blah blah blah, and so I can just see how every year it just whereas this year with the team, I'm taking a bit of a step back. I mean, I'm not saying I won't race on the bike. I mean, we still might do something, but I just said with Kona, it's like, guys, listen, I'm right there, and this is, I know I haven't got the years ahead of me that I've already had. I've got however many, it might be one, it might be two, it might be four, who knows. I'm going to go until the wheels fall off. And by that, I mean, when I stop getting better, while I don't.
That's the end point, and that's the real.
Yeah.
Is it if you won in Kona before had you felt reached your potential,
Yeah.
you keep going because you can get better, or you sort of
Yeah.
tick that I'm a world, that
Yeah.
big
No,
box.
I definitely don't ever think if ideally have a big win, but I
Yeah.
don't think it'd be like, walk off. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
I've had too many losses to enjoy figuring out how to come back from it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 So you think you might
I
go, oh, now that I figured out how to do this, I might,
try,
keep going until I've
yeah,
made the most of it.
yeah. And I mean, I'll know. I mean, I'll know the moment when it's like, look, I mean, I'm surrounded by the best guys, all the time. So I'll know when the level is getting away from me. And I'm far from there yet.
Yeah.
So, I'm really excited. So this year with the team, I didn't have to do the camps. I don't have to be in Australia for 2 down under or anything like that. So all of a sudden, and Geraint's in Australia, so we're not in LA, which, I mean, tragic what's going on down there.
Yeah.
But I'm here in Andorra. It's the middle of winter, and it turns out that swimming in an indoor pool, 50-meter pool, is actually one fantastic winter sport because you do not want to go outside at the moment.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah. Good excuse to get the
to a
water's
degree.
warm. Yeah.
It, and I don't have to worry about racing imminently, and I can just take a step back, take a deep breath with this guy. I can spend, we honestly spend 2 to 3 hours at the facility every day, whether it's swimming, for 90 minutes to 2 hours now. The first couple of days were closer to three with all the technical stuff. But then we're in the gym and then we're doing band work and then he's got videos and cameras and we're analyzing it, like, I'm going to work, I'm not
Yeah.
swimming. I feel like I get up, each morning, I, pack my bag, have my breakfast and go off to work. That's the first part of the day, and that's sort of how the same way it was. I remember back in 2019 we started working with Brett. More intensely. 18 we started working with him, or I did, and it was like, look, man, you got to build some wheels. I'm not going to push you to do a lot because you can get injured. So, cool the jets. And 19 was the first year we started doing these 100K run weeks sort of back to back. And it was so exciting. I remember we got to sort of mid-March and Tim Kerrison said, well, yeah, I mean, this is great. Your running's going well, but you're training for 12 hours a week, because I'd literally just do my 6-7 hours of running, a couple of swims, and maybe one ride because I was so stuffed from the running. Like it was taking so much out of me and taking everything I had. But to make that change, it was the only way to do it.
Yeah.
And so the fact that this swimming right now routine feels so different to me makes me know that it's right. Like to make a change, you have to make a change. And it's doing that work initially. We talked before about doing stuff for a long time, but in this case, obviously I can swim, I can get in the water. It's more about, rebuild a technical focus of building your stroke. And then, I'll be able to train again. As in, we haven't done any effort. So it's no different to rowing or anything else where you're just trying to do it properly, because if you start pulling hard again, you lose it all, you're far better off doing 20 strokes properly, than risking doing a couple of bad ones and sort of resetting all over.
Yeah.
So that's the process.
When you use the word team to describe Ineos, and just for the listeners, is the professional cycling team, and that's who you ride for on the road. But if we were to talk about other professional triathletes, their team would be the people that are oriented around them for their triathlon aspirations. So, and you and I have talked about this personally before. The thing that I get curious about is, your team, because your focus is on the Ironman and you have reasons to be engaged with the cycling team, and you have had reasons, but they have different priorities, whereas your priority is to service them as makes sense, but that only works if you're able to show up in the races that mean something to you, and those are against opposition that have a team that's focused on that project and on them. So are you the one that, with your race calendar, even though you're working with, you have a swimming coach, you have running coach, and a lot of this is, some aspects are technical, some aspects are when it comes to the program, but who makes the decisions about when is going to go, what's going to happen when, and why? Is that on you?
Yeah, so I mean, Tim Kerrison, originally, and he left the team in 21, and at that point, everything was still going great. Like 2020, obviously with COVID, I didn't do an Ironman, but then in 21, I'd won Copenhagen. Kona was still meant to be on, and then got cancelled last minute. So I was still on that, but he was working with the team still at that point. He's in charge of performance here, so he was day-to-day manage it. But then he left in 22, and that was so. He's been back in Australia, and what also happened was the team kind of started declining a bit at that point, and like. See, Chris Froome had crashed, Egan Bernal then crashed, like our league lost, the two of them. And the team just started to struggle. So of course, all of a sudden this like fun bit with me, which it was, I think the team really enjoyed it. It's like, oh wow, Cameron can like ride for the guys for training, and then he goes and wins an Ironman, and he might win Kona, like there was this real excitement about it. And then all of a sudden, the team started not going so well. So it was like, well, we need you at this bike race. Like these guys, or this guy's injured, and it was, and doing your job, and I guess being someone that isn't good at saying no, or maybe thinking for myself, which is probably a good rowing trait to have, because you learn to, I always used to think in rowing, I kind of want to be the worst in the crew, not that I want to be the worst, but
100%. It'll be a good crew if I'm the worst, because I'll be good.
I'll be really good, and they all have to be better. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That
Yeah.
was always thought. And
Yeah.
so I would just sort of fall into the line. 22 you do that, and then 23 you do that, and then of course 24 was really bad last year. With the team really struggled and guys didn't want to race. So all of a sudden, instead of it being like last minute trying to fill a gap to stop from a bunch of changes going on, all of a sudden I realized I was going to races because I'd be training with guys here that wanted to go to a music concert or wanted to go and do this or wanted
Yeah.
to go and do that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they were getting their butts kicked at the races. They didn't want to be there, or they needed a rest or whatever else. And you're
And
just
these were
like,
races that the team had to participate in, but they didn't really move
yeah.
the needle for you or for the better guys on the team. So it takes some of the guts out of the motivation.
So you're there and no one really wanted to even be there. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, well, what on earth am I doing here?
Yeah.
And it really hit home in the summer when I was getting ready for the Ironman in Frankfurt, and I'd really built up through the year for it. And we'd sort of agreed I'd have time for that. And then all of a sudden, yeah, post Olympics, guys wanted a break, guys wanted to go on a trip, guys were sick or didn't have a great experience, so they didn't want to race. And I'm all of a sudden sent off to Poland, and I miss Frankfurt, but the guys there, I mean, one guy went home during the race just because he wanted to go home. And I was just thinking, yeah, wow. I mean, I, there was a really significant race. There was the Ironman Pro Series, which I was really high up in the standings, and I just needed another Ironman to sort of validate because you needed three, and I didn't get to do that. And then that meant, I didn't then, there was races after Kona, a couple of half Ironmans where you'd sort of fight for the final points. It was a great concept, like for a year long sort of narrative. And, to put it in perspective, the guy ended up winning the series. He was sixth in Kona, so finished just ahead of me, but, I'd done much better in the other races.
Yeah.
And Patrick Langer ended up being second, who'd won Kona. And then the guy that was third hadn't beaten me all year,
Yeah.
So I could genuinely say that I was in that, and it was exciting.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have minded had I gone to a bike race with the team of 2020 or 21 where we went to everything to win, with that mindset, and it would have driven me to go into my Kona prep fired up as hell. Yeah, we just had a great race, that's go, my turn now. But it was just like, oh God, these guys don't even want to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've actually got a lot on the line this weekend in Germany. Like I've given up a lot to be here to support you, and yet, you don't even seem to care if you get support or not. You're sort of just here to go through the motions. And it was just a real shame with the team and culturally that it kind of went that way. And so that's obviously what made me sort of put my hand up and say, listen, guys, this isn't really working. I mean, honestly, I don't feel like I contribute much to the team in that. I mean, I go along to a race, like we had one great race last year with Tom Pidcock, Amstel Gold Race, and I just knew the guy. He was so motivated to win at that point. He was under a bit of pressure from the team, and Olympics were coming up, and he had won, and I'd been here training with him, and when they asked me to do it, I was like, absolutely, I want to be there, even though I had an Ironman the following Sunday in South Africa. And you get on the front, and when I'm there and we've got a guy like that, like the whole peloton just sort of watches me because they're like, okay, Cameron's going to ride, so we're not going to attack because he's going to chase me. So you kind of have to tell people to attack. You two go, okay, that's it, guys. I'm going to control these 3 or 4 guys. Everyone have a pee and get some food in, and then we'll start work, And that's how it worked. It was just clockwork. I rode on my own on the front for 150, 3-4 hours. And then the attack started, and obviously Tom ended up in the move and won, and then I went to South Africa that weekend for the Ironman, led until 5K to go in the run, and then got past, but I just ran out of gas. But that mentality I had, I was like, I'm here to win. I'm a winner. I've been just part of a winning culture. Now I want to show my boys what I can do. That really drove me. And as said, started to lose that throughout the year when you went to more races where there wasn't someone like in Tom's position where he could win it. As we were going with a purpose, it was just like, okay, guys, we'll just see how the race opens up and see what happens. It's like,
Yeah. That's not what I'm here.
what do I do? I'm
Yeah.
used to sitting on the front controlling this thing. So where do
Yeah.
I?
Yeah. You must have been sitting in the peloton
Yeah,
and like, what's the point? What are we doing?
yeah. What's
Yeah.
the point? I mean, I'm not here for that. I didn't come back for this sport. I came back because this was the best team in the world. I trained with the guys. I love training with them, and then having had the odd chance, when they needed me to go to a race and help them win. Great camaraderie then in the training group when we go back to work. It to me it all made sense, but that kind of just got lost in the last couple of years. So back to the team part with the Ironman guys, with the team working all. So originally I kind of had that the team was really working towards what I was trying to do in Ironman, but then because of the way the team's gone, I
Yeah.
mean, and I don't blame the team for it. They've had to put everything into trying to keep the wheels going. I mean, worrying about my hobby, I guess, is what it kind of got seen as, is like the last thing in the world. It's not a priority. I mean, the team
Yeah.
is far greater individual, and so instead of getting bitter or angry about it, I was just like, well, guys, I'll just remove myself from this, and and you guys, run your team, and I think it's going to be just fine. I mean, at the moment, I don't really feel like I contribute much anyway with the way the team is and what you're riding for, the way you're riding races, and we'll just see how it evolves throughout the year. But the results being, they're actually more supportive now towards my Ironman goals because that's what I'm focused on. And, if the circumstances arise and there's some races and you can help us out, it's like, well, yeah, absolutely. That sounds fantastic. Now we're back on the right path. It just
Yeah.
lost way for a couple of years. That's all.
Sure. And you would do that. Like you'd be up for that 100%. And I think you really painted a picture of how it went from making sense to not. And it was a combination of factors. It probably didn't help that there's a handful of
Super.
generational
Yeah.
cyclists that have made the job a lot harder for, especially as Garant and a few of those guys have, Froome, they're getting on and
Yeah.
moving on. So tough to then, go into races expecting success, which is what you want to contribute to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't really serve a purpose for you or for the team. Meanwhile, you've got a thing
Yeah.
you genuinely believe you can be successful at a global standard in a way that's meaningful to you. And there were times when it was running in conflict. So is the goal for this year I mean, you're targeting Kona and everything is feeding into that. Is that the goal?
Yeah. So this year, actually, they split it. They still do the
Oh,
split.
it's
So we've got,
neat.
yeah, but yeah, 100%. I mean, that's my focus, and yeah, that's just it. I mean, Kona just gave me more belief than ever last year. The way I ran and came back from where I did, um, and also though I think the people around me, that I've known for a long time, that would always, I guess especially the last few years with me doing both sports. Oh, that's great. That's good. Yeah, good luck. Yeah, you'll have a good. But all of a sudden now, dude, like knuckle down on this. I mean, do it. I mean, James and Drew, for example, talked about them, and afterwards, okay, what are you going to do now? I was like, I'm going to figure out this swimming. And I said to, I can't, I think it was both of them, but I know I sound like a broken record because I've talked about my swimming my whole career, but I am going to do it. I mean, now this is it. I mean, this really cracked me. Like
Yeah.
the way the race panned out, and I mean, it's not saying that I can't go next time and end up seventh with a great swim, but I definitely don't want to go to finish my days in the sport wondering now. So it gave me more self belief than ever that I can get this done, and that's just the total focus. And I'll stay involved with the team. I'm going to train with the guys, obviously, like normal. I mean, really nothing changes. It's just I'm not going to get called into races,
Yeah.
particularly in this first part of the year. Yeah,
Does that mean you
I think
have this is
great.
this is an off season at the moment when you finish and I think this is my curiosity, but perhaps for people that you're not coming from a triathlon background, or even if they are, and it's pretty obvious what things might look like in the lead up to it, which is a ton of volume, the three disciplines, some version of a taper. But given that progress is really made over a 12-month calendar,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and you need to make it sustainable. So when you get done with you cross the finish line, to what extent is it tools down, given that if you've got if you have to make it a commitment at the moment to, in a 3 hour session, swim, or a 2 hour session, swim 300 meters, that's not really developing the engine, even though it's completely necessary. So
Mm.
are you at just a phase of things where it's like, that's not the priority for right now, I can build that later? So do you come all the way off knowing that you can build all the way back up, or do you try chip away at it?
Yeah, with the running, there was no doubt, like I said, the example, because it's so demanding on your body. Swimming, it's more up here that's hard. So it's long as I wouldn't, I mean, I'm still training pretty normally, fortunately. And also, it's actually, I guess, with all this new evolution of training, all this sort of zone two work and whatever, I mean, it's actually kind of how I've always done it anyway. I inadvertently got into doing a bit more, I mean, call it junk miles, particularly on the bike, just because I could go riding with the guys and, we'd go out wherever and be an explorer and go have a coffee and all that. And it was sort of like great. But now that I've got better at running and also spending time in the pool, that junk miles time, there's that sort of, getting some bit of volume. I can actually do it on those. So I guess at this time of the year, as opposed to doing a bunch of volume, I feel like I'm just doing a heap of quality.
Yeah.
Okay, the swimming, not swimming hard, but running, I'm definitely running really hard. And when I'm on the bike, I'm riding really hard. So, and instead of doing maybe 15 to 20 hours on the bike, I'm doing maybe 12, which is
Okay.
still plenty when you're doing, 6, 7 hours of running. And
That's how much
yeah,
running you're doing at the moment.
yeah.
And
So
how
between,
quickly were you doing that after?
what's that?
Like, did you take a break, or is it just you keep plowing through?
Uh, oh no. So I do that in 5 days, 4 or 5 days. Yeah, in different
Yeah.
blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I'm wondering is, after your racing calendar,
Oh, okay.
yeah, did you, because it is hard on the body, and because you
Yeah.
had a season in which you were juggling a lot of things, added to which is the logistics you got. So do you want to get better? So you're like, get back, you finish and you're like, I want to get
Yeah.
better. So let's rip in, or is it, let's just decompress for
Yeah.
a moment and allow a certain amount of detraining, knowing that you do have
A
a
long
chunk
time.
of time. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I try to push. I try to do some more racing after Kona each year, November. Try to push it as close to Christmas because I like to enjoy Christmas. So I've become a bit more traditional with triathlon, and you start at the start of the year. And yeah,
Yeah.
those first weeks feel pretty average, but already by now, what we're in the third week of January, and to be honest, I feel like I'm back to where I was when I ended the year, which is really what you want because you want to be improving. But
Yeah.
yeah, I took a good. You take a couple of weeks where you really, if you don't want to do anything, don't do anything at all, and then probably another month where I call it just generally exercise, I guess, where you try not to lose too much more on top of that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And certainly don't press set. So it is quite, and it's when I start getting agitated. I want to train. That's when I know it's like the time to, you know, get back into it. But when you wake up and it's like, oh, okay, I could go skiing today because I don't have to train, or my mates are going because like the guys on the bike are already back training, because
Yeah.
they're off there, right? I'm like, actually, what's Josh up to? And I
Yeah.
would, but for a good couple of weeks or 3 weeks, the skiing was no, mate, I'll meet you after you ride for a coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
But it's still
I,
not, you're not sitting on your ass.
no, I
Yeah.
can't do nothing. I'm impossible at that. And honestly, And I prefer to take, we've got in the habit, for me, it's better you take like a week off a number of times throughout the year.
Yeah.
So,
But a week off, like most people's off is off. What is your week off? Because for clarity.
yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I'll do nothing. Same sort of concept, I mean, if there's something, I'll either do nothing, or if there's something else going on, I'll do that. Like, I just don't plan any training.
Yeah.
But, during the year though, swimming is one that you can't not swim. Well, personally, I can't not swim for a week. I mean, I don't swim well enough, or hadn't done well enough to afford to lose the feel for the water, the little feel that I did have, because otherwise you go back in after a week and it's like, starting all over again. I feel like now that I'm doing this block that I'm doing now, where I'm getting fuel for the water and I'm swimming properly and I'm feeling muscles that I'm going to be able to generate more fatigue than I've ever generated before in swimming, I feel like I'll get to a point which will be wonderful, where I don't have to swim for a couple of weeks, where I have to give the body a rest, or even during the season where that week off I can not think about going for a swim. But yeah, I just like a real mental break, not having to train for a week. And if you want to go on a trip or you want to go somewhere, and we do that, sort of after the spring, the first part of the year, and then certainly in the summer, do a big Ironman there at some point, and then take a week. And then obviously after Kona again, or Nice, the Worlds. So, you almost have sort of three of those during the year.
Yeah.
And then the one at the end of the year is maybe definitely that week,
Yeah.
but maybe two of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
but maybe it generally ends up being more around 10 days. And then sort of, start. Whereas when you take those other weeks, as you know, you're not going to lose fitness there. In fact, the best I ever feel is often off the back of those
Yeah.
weeks.
You come up a bit.
You feel,
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I find that sometimes if you're very competitive and you're so connected to your performance, it's so meaningful, your ego is attached as well, that it's hard to take the foot off, even if you logically know that it'll help you over the long term. At least that week, you have to let go, and
yeah.
that takes you a while because you seem a little bit of a restless person. So I'd imagine there were probably years where you just plowed through.
Yeah, that's for sure. And honestly, I had this conversation yesterday, with Hayden Wild, actually, or it might have been the swim coach. It was one or the other. Anyway, it was a long day, and
Yeah.
and I was talking about we were talking about training and recovery, and I said the fascinating thing with and we were talking about my training now, what I'm doing, and really happy with it. Like the intensity of every day, or I have a rest day. So I basically train 5 days and have 2 days where I might do nothing, but
Yeah.
generally I'll at least sort of swim or go for a ski or something, go ski mowing, just move. But we're talking about when I was training with Froomey in 2017, and the peak of his powers, and we would obviously he trained incredibly hard. I mean, it was like the hard days were like a race day. I mean, you
Mm.
hear about this stuff about Pogacar now doing these zone 2 ridings. I mean, Froomey was doing that years. I mean, it's nothing. It's just that this guy is a bit of a phenom now, and that's sort of like the discussion point. I mean, there wasn't ever a lot of talk around what Froomey's training was, but I can assure you that back in the day, it was no different. The only difference that you see between that type of training and what he was doing was we would train incredibly hard for a day, like Froome wise, and then the next day might be super long but quite easy. It was
Mm.
almost like train your body to recover while on the bike, and that was
Yeah.
because of the demands of the tour were like that. I mean, you remember watching like Froome would smash everyone,
Yeah.
and then the next day, Team Sky would just all be lined up on the front,
Yeah.
controlling the race. Froome
Yeah.
was just in the fields and recovering on the bike. And then, okay, next day, yep, let's go and throttle everyone again.
Yeah.
And that was Tim Garrison. I mean, he just worked out the sport and trained for that. The difference now is we don't have those easier days. Every day it's sort of on. But so the guys are just like, they're training sort of the same, but the days, every day is sort of like,
You got it back to
you might
back.
You go back to back, three
Yeah.
or four training back to back to back to condition your body for. And that was why when I did the Vuelta in 2020 with the team, that was the only time they needed me for a Grand Tour. But I got better and better as it went on, because with running, we do a 6-day cycle where we run it. And for me at that point, up until 19, like when I was really building the foundation, every run was hard. So
Yeah.
6 days, even if what else I did apart from the run was an easy something, swim or ride, it still felt like a hard day. So
Yeah.
6 days I had to get out of bed, man. And
Yeah.
I used to,
Hanging on by the end.
I mean, I just convinced myself that the AIS were generations ahead of everyone else, where they used to force us to have Sundays off, because I would have it religiously off every week. I wouldn't lift anything. I wouldn't move. I'd just watch TV and have an ice bath and give myself that one day of recovery, because I really felt like I earned it. And so when I went into a Grand Tour where modern cycling started to evolve, I felt quite comfortable with every day being hard. And
Yeah.
every day I
Yeah.
got better compared to the rest of the field. And so, that's sort of been, I guess, like the big change. But what I was talking about with the recovery part, one thing that really struck me with Froome was how hard he would train, but it didn't matter if he didn't perform in the race. And Tim Kerrison would build all these sessions that were so race specific, like even to the point of the exact, length of the climb, the same profile of a flat section before, and we ride hard there. Like Tim loved that. It was like a game for him, like trying to build, a virtual race.
Pretty specific.
Very specific.
Yeah.
Team we're in a team time trial formation, we're peeling off, etc.
Why not just go in races? Like with it.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're preparing for a Grand Tour, that's something else.
You need to manage the load and all that. But it really taught me the importance of being ready. It's great you can do all the work, but if you don't go and execute on race day, it's all for nothing. And at Team Sky, there was just everyone worked so hard. I mean, like everyone back in those days, when I was first there, and I wasn't even on the team per se, I was just training with them, but everyone was just do everything for you. Like all you had to do was focus on training and performing. And you go to a race, you owed it to everyone to perform. You didn't want to come back and the race didn't go so well. Like you wanted to come back and have that moment to. I mean, that was the moment to really enjoy. And I think a lot of my career, I got quite tangled up in impressing coaches and worrying about impressing every session, and then it probably didn't work out on race day. Anyway, what we would have expected or I would have expected. Far too often. And honestly, I don't think I learnt that until I started Ironman, until it was literally all on me, where you feel all of that, where you feel a whole, okay, there's the great part, the emotion, you cross the line and all that. But when it's on you to, I mean, the worst conversation I ever had was after Nice. I sort of, in last 23, I had a stupid crash on the bike where I was trying to get across to the front of the race. Well, Layla was in front. Ditlev was just ahead of me. I was trying to get to him, crashed, hit my back, ended up falling apart on the run. I mean, it was terrible. I was 14th. And which, I mean, I guess isn't that bad, but considering what had happened.
Yeah.
But to call Brett Kirby, for example, at Nike, where we'd put in, he always puts in so much effort, and explain to him how the race didn't go well. It's like the worst moment, and I would have been very ready for him to just say, listen, we've really loved working with you, but instead it was like, okay, mate, let's double down on this. We've got to get it right. So if something goes wrong, your ceiling's up here and you might slip to here, it's like, wow, but so those as an Ironman, that really hit home, but I really learned it from Froome. Like, he same thing on a day off, he'd just stay in bed. I mean, I remember being in Tenerife and he just wouldn't come out of his room. Like he'd just rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then race week, it was all of a sudden we're doing pretty much nothing. It's like, well, Tim's like, yeah, well, you got to be fresh. No, you don't need to do 4 or 5. I'm not going to help you now. You got to do enough, make the body feel it, blah, blah, blah. And that was, as stupid as that sounds, I mean, it was amazing how many decades it took me to learn that, and how many elite
It does seem obvious, but
so many would never learn it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you got to imagine that if you're prepared to do all the work
Mm,
and everyone there is, like the no one
mm.
you're competing with is lazy.
No.
So then it's a matter of what you do and load management. And part of that is knowing when to press and knowing when to step back, even if that's on a weekly or monthly or yearly
Yeah.
basis. But those are skills, and if you're used to pushing, 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 knowing when to not might not be a skill that you have, and that's one you need to learn, especially if you, as you have a body that matures and you have an intellect that you should learn a thing or two about your body and the sport and how to manage yourself. And then you have to do that just to be able to apply those new learnings. You have to be able to manage yourself better. Otherwise, it's going to get taken away from you, which is definitely the point that you're at now. And I see that, I remember when we caught up in Portland and I asked you just, given where you were, to what extent you were thinking about what's next. And you were almost like, no, I mean, I'm not even, nah, I'm not even not on my radar. I'm not thinking about it. And I was like, fucking good on you, like good mission focused.
Mm.
And yeah, and you're still there now because you believe that you can get better, but you know that the curtains are coming. It's a matter of when, and you're trying to balance skill acquisition and training. So how do you think about both with the body and the aspirations that you have, but also the experience that you have? How do you make smart decisions now about the load that you can accumulate versus the rest that you need to take to benefit from that work?
Yeah. It's really clever because everyone talks about recovery getting harder as you get older. And I just still haven't seen that. And I don't know if that's because I've just never pushed myself as far as I could have pushed myself. I mean, I've never been injured. I don't get injured. I mean, sickness. I wouldn't say I get sick very often. I don't think I've been a notorious person for like actually getting everything out of myself. I mean, mobility. I mean, stuff. I watch you do, admire that, and strength. It's something I've just got back into. But mobility is a big thing that I want to incorporate in, and from when I've been doing that, particularly with my running focus last year, I've seen the benefits of that. Now with the swimming, even more so. Um, and your body just working better seems to just help you recover better day to day.
So when
And
you say recovery has gotten harder, is it, more proactive? You need to do more shit to recover as opposed to just staying in bed or just chilling out.
yeah, no, I'm saying I haven't noticed a drop in
Oh, yeah,
recovery.
yeah.
In
You
fact,
mean as you get older, recovery gets hard, like backing up gets harder
everyone
as you get
says
older.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
says,
maybe
oh,
you don't need to do
yeah,
all that stuff then because it's working, you're getting better. And I would
yeah,
normally say, oh, there's all these buttons you can push to improve recovery, but you only do that so you can do the work to get better. And if you're already
yeah.
doing that, then it's hard to argue to do that other stuff too, especially if your plate's pretty full on a given day.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's how you fit all this other stuff in, and that, and I guess I don't. Yeah, you're just listening to it's other people telling me how it should be, and I mean, I'm like, honestly, I don't feel that yet. I don't know if it's me trying to trick myself, trying to convince myself that I should still be here, but if it is, that's great too. But in my heart of hearts, I just haven't even noticed. In fact, I was sitting on the bike on the turbo trainer. It was freezing cold, so I was and I got a gym, but it's pretty cold this time of year. It doesn't have great heating. So I was in the garage next to the laundry where it's a bit warmer. And I was looking at my sort of roll bikes and it hit me like, oh yeah, okay, you won't do this. This isn't going to be around forever. You know, I mean, and there's like this cool bike and that cool bike and these cool toys and these cool shoes and all this stuff. And and you just but what it does is it just reminds me, fucking get into this, like
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah,
this. This,
yeah.
you know, you are so lucky. Like, how lucky are you to be sitting here doing this, like working your ass off to try to be the best at something, and honestly, genuinely believing that you've still got a chance to do it despite your age. And yeah, so I just haven't. I'm still like then. I haven't even thought about what's next. I haven't even thought about a time frame of when it might be. But yeah, while I still feel like I can find stuff, and I mean the cognitive stuff, absolutely. Like with swimming, I mean it does get hard to learn things as you get older, but
Mm.
I'm lucky that I came from rowing at a pretty high level, and I've got still these memories in my mind. Like I said about Drew and James, the way they finish the stroke, and the way I can adapt that to the way I finish a swimming stroke. And
Even
yeah,
with
I've got
James, I remember being at the AIS with him 2007, 8, and what you're describing with the swim, this very specific that only a molecule of the people listening to this are going to understand in the sport of swimming what you're even talking about. But you've got to be interested in those details because that's what's necessary to be good at that thing, which is your profession. But I think it has to be part of you to be curious about how to get better in the first place. And Jimmy, I remember talking to tennis coaches at the AS about the grip on a tennis racket, which he would have
uh,
only been as a hobbyist. And
yeah,
I was thinking, why do you care? Because I only cared about getting better at the thing that
rowing.
rowing. Yeah, basically, and the stuff that was associated with that. Whereas he wanted to be excellent at everything, which
Yeah,
played out pretty well for him. So I
yeah,
thought, my learning from that was embody more of that. Like, don't hang
mm,
your hat on, or I'm just going to drill down on the stuff that's relevant to me. But that was something that I had to learn. And I don't know for Jimmy, but I think that was probably instinctual for him. Like I have a curiosity about how to get better, but
yeah.
not in things I'm not connected to. So you find yourself that, I mean, you'll swing a golf club on
Yeah.
occasion. So you feel like this is something you need to do for your sport, or you just kind of wonder how to crack that nut anyway.
Yeah, I guess fortunately when you say that, I'm a bit like, I mean, even golf, I had a lesson recently when I was in Miami and very good coach. And we were talking about, generating club head speed. And it was really all around the range of motion of your shoulders because the bigger the arc and then the way it comes down, it just sort of whips through. And, because I was sort of like rowing, like all hunched up. So
Yeah.
I hunched over the ball, so you're quite restricted in how much you can actually generate power, which was kind of counterintuitive to the way I would have thought, where you kind of got to let it go and not have the control to generate the power.
Yeah.
And swimming, is kind of the same with the shoulder extension that you're trying to get there to, because obviously if your shoulder's here and you're swimming, there's much more reach when your shoulder's there.
Yeah.
You get sort of that much more opportunity to grab water and get past. Um, but yeah, I do find myself when I'm trying to learn something, I'm always sort of linking it to something. I mean, for me to learn something, I guess to answer your question, I'll always either draw on experience I've got with something else, or I'll think of something else I'm familiar with and then learn from that to then learn from
Yeah.
that.
I have no doubt. I would have thought formerly
Mm,
that swinging a golf club was like this is just a distraction and a risk, but now I would think for you, but for anyone that practicing skill acquisition there is going to show up, especially if it's something that you can't do naturally. So you have to, how am I
yeah.
going to do this properly? And you're basically a novice, so that then you take that mindset to something that you're approaching swimming as a novice, even though you've been a
Mm,
professional Ironman for near a
yeah.
decade, or coming up on a decade. So yeah, I mean, either you've cultivated it or it's just part of who you are, but I would have no doubt that it's showing up for you.
But even in the gym, I mean, doing some exercise like some tricep stuff where you're sort of locking the elbow and sort of getting over it like this. And I've done hundreds of them in the gym now, just in the past week, and now I can feel that in the water. Like you bringing these things in. But I even researched. I was thinking, gosh, he's telling me all this stuff, and all of a sudden now I've got to think about my catch and my finish and the breathe. I'm trying to put it all together. Then I might get that right, but I got that wrong, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got to get my brain So I was reading the other night on cognitive function, how to improve that,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that when I'm swimming, I can process more. But it turns out I'm already a fair way there. It sort of suggests reading and being active and keeping the mind moving is the best way for cognitive function
Yeah,
to
no,
be.
seriously, it's like staying, that's the best way they say to offset your
Yeah,
dementia is keep your brain working, even drive in a different way than you normally would to the same place. You normally like you've got to keep your brain working, but I think for you that's a big part of the reason that you can keep going is your body working, your body is working just fine. You're still
mm,
very interested in the process because you've got this curiosity. You can see all the ways in which you can get better, and there's
yeah,
none of the reasons for why you wouldn't. So any question that you get where it's about, hey Cam, you're getting on, you're almost like, that's not how you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about I can get better at this and I'm going to get better at this.
yeah. I just think that's great, isn't it? I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, how lucky, how cool's that? I am old. I am older than everyone else here.
Yeah.
but I, but yeah, I feel
Yeah.
great. And I love it that it probably annoys the hell out of them all that I am still here. So
I think
that's because they.
I think they're happy to have you in both sports, honestly, mate.
Yeah, to be fair, I think so as well. I mean, especially you kind of like cross a bit of a threshold, I think, where you're there, but then yeah, you do become a bit more of a novelty, and it is really nice, especially from other older athletes or whatever that you know love what you do and the way you do it. And if I can give, I mean, it's like back to Stephen Hawkins, me sitting there as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old boy, it gave me the belief. I mean, I mean, of course, you want to leave a mark. I've dedicated my life to sport. Now, yeah, absolute my entire life, and if my mark could be that, you know, people that are over 40 can all of a sudden believe that, wait a minute, I can actually still get the best out of myself. If that's a message I can help spread, and give them a greater quality of life longer into their life, which
Yeah.
I really believe it can. The longer you hold on to it, um, that'd be pretty cool. That'd be
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. I feel like
So
you've been trying to do that at all ages, make the best of it. And now that you're in this decade of your life, well, you're setting an example for all of us that are over 40, which includes me. And I'm stoked to see you doing your thing. And I've reflected on our conversation and that must have been during the pandemic since then, because I wasn't packing up the tools, but it was at a point where I was contemplating, what aspirations should I have? Because I've still got this urge to, I want to get better at things. I want to learn how to get better at things. And should I just be training for health now and to stick around for my kids, or should I still get the fuck after it? And so
yeah,
to have you there, I was almost like, man, he didn't even. I went home and told my wife, I was like, I asked him, I was like, hey, mate, to what extent are you thinking about what happens after? And he almost was like, you weren't fuck you, but you were like,
yeah,
it's not, it wasn't, it was like a silly question to ask, which I thought was awesome.
mm, yeah,
You're a bit of we know this, a unique creature in what you've been able to do, but you've also trained with some all-time freaky specimens. So I'm wondering, of the people that you've trained with, and you've already mentioned Kurumi, but you've trained with multiple Tour de France winners, Olympic gold medalists, Ironman athletes of all triathletes of all pedigrees. So who are those that you've been most impressed by, the more outstanding athletes that occur to you over your career?
yeah. I mean, I don't want to pee in their pockets, but I always go back to James and Drew. I mean, the Olympics. I mean, for me, I mean, obviously amazing what he did, and not to say that one's better than the
Yeah.
other. And I guess they're obviously the athletes that stand out, because of their ability to do it again. But for me, just that Olympic realizing how far off I was from even thinking about getting an Olympic gold medal once I'd gone to the Olympics. Um, the fact that they got it right so often on that
Yeah.
one day, that just the and you weren't surprised, you just sort of expected it, and it was they were so good at their craft and their execution, their planning, and yet the injury. I mean, Drew could barely walk. Basically had to pick
Coaching,
him up
yeah.
and bring him out, with his back and different issues that they had over the. Still got it done. I mean, I they are still my point of reference. I mean, if there's a couple of people that when something happens, and they're the ones that I'm looking forward to hearing from, whether I've done well or bad, or to discuss. They're those guys are still the ones that really impress me the most. I guess also because of their ability, despite to be so normal, to
Yeah,
be able to
yeah.
talk, relate to you, but relate to so many people of so many different levels, not to put themselves, on this pedestal or anything, approachable. And those guys have certainly impressed me the most as athletes that
Yeah.
I've come.
To
Hmm.
what extent do you think that was because they're, big brothers, you're younger, and even on the team in Athens, for example, you were 21, and then by
Yeah,
the time you were, your contemporaries with Froome or Tom Pidcock or
yeah,
Geraint, these are
yeah.
teammates, so you're not really looking at them like that, and you have to consider yourself at that same standard to be able to show up and perform. So do you think that, had an influence?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just think being at the top level of sport and seeing it, and then seeing the guys that succeed, and then just seeing the ones that do get it. I mean, that Olympic part, that every 4 years. I mean, that just in triathlon, people ask, I always say Alistair Brownlee. He won 2 Olympic gold medals, and in Olympic distance triathlon, there is so many variables. The swim, the bike, or the run, and for him to get it right, the way he did. I mean, it's very hard to dominate that type of. I mean, I'd say Ironman is much easier to be consistently good at. There's a bit less variable there. Once you're at that level, I mean,
Yeah.
guys tend to. Whereas with that Olympic part, being once every 4 years is so much more on the line, and to eke out that win. We're also often about small margins. I mean, they might look like big margins, but in reality, of the time of the race, they're quite small. I just have, as far as I said, as far as the athletes that impress me, the Olympic athletes are still, that. Not that the tour guys aren't. The fact that Froome could do it year after year after year after year. But he at least got a shot at it year after year after year after
Yeah, yeah, it
year.
does make a difference. I think it's probably hard to appreciate.
It is. I mean, if you said to Froome, okay, the next tour is in 4 years, I mean, that would change things a lot. If you had a Tour de France once every 4 years, I mean,
Yeah.
luckily for everyone else, we see it every year. But you often see, like Pogacar, like it looked like he was unbeatable. In 2 years, he got beaten. And now, last 2 years, he's looked unbeatable. And we assume he's going to probably do that again this year. But we assume that last time.
Yeah.
So, and it ebbs and flows, or he could crash and not even be there. But that's all right, because next year he'll be here before we know it
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. And you can fill out a career over time because if you win, you have enough good seasons, then your highlights are stacked up. Whereas if you're a rower,
Yeah.
those opportunities, and if you're in a crew boat, there's even more
Nice.
variables that are outside of your control. And so those guys that show up in, no matter what the situation and they're on the podium, then yeah, it does say something about them.
Yeah. Yeah. So to answer that kind of question, those guys are, they're definitely the ones that,
This is a
yeah,
shame. This is two podcasts in a row where those two guys have, it's been a bit of,
everyone talks about them
well,
around.
Hamish said the same thing, and here we are. But I
He's a guy that's won a bunch of gold medals too. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Hamish's too. I mean, I went down and watched the sailing for a day, and before I headed off to Kona, and
Same team, right? Same. Oh, well,
well,
Ineos is there. Yeah,
racing
competing. Yeah.
obviously.
Um,
I mean, but for him to look up to guys like that, I think just sort of probably ratifies what I'm saying. You know,
he'd
I mean
said
that.
that he couldn't have described to you or anyone how to move a boat until he thinks about 2011, where he was able to absorb some of the stuff that Drew was putting out about, what you're trying to do, make the boat go faster.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
that, by Hamish's own admission, that was an unlock for him in terms of it changed everything thereafter. And having not had the success that any of these people we've mentioned on the water, I have to reflect on my time rowing and think, well, what did I get out of this if it wasn't Olympic gold medals? And I think rowing, getting to do a campaign with Drew and one with Jimmy was just great experiences to have, because having done that, the mystery there was less mystery as to how they were able to do. Like, it
yeah,
made perfect sense. I'm like, I get why Jimmy has done what he's done, and I get why Drew's done what he's done, and so it makes
mm,
sense when you've reflected upon the how you see them and how they've obviously influenced you over your
mm,
career and still do. And then for Hamish, same thing. So
mm.
um, yeah, you didn't want to
Yeah,
piss in
but
their pockets, but
with,
we have.
yeah, with Froome as well, and even with them, like I said, it's that you that ability to really switch on when it's needed to, and then the ability to like to bring it
Yeah.
on the moment. I mean, and obviously I saw it in training with both of them, and then obviously you saw it executed in the race. But that they really, those kind of guys really epitomize that. If you haven't done it, you're not going to in training. You're not going to do it in the. There's not going to be a magical. There's not going to be a remarkable
No,
outcome.
no, no. There's no Hail
Like,
Mary in
yeah, there's
rowing.
no hurry out there. Like you need to have just done the work, and obviously there's a very methodical approach to how you do that, because putting yourself through those kind of efforts, you can't do that all the time. But yeah, they're real commonalities between, I guess, those two. Because we're talking about guys. I mean, there's one thing, great performer like Guerin won the tour. He's won two Olympic gold medal. I mean, also a phenomenal, incredible athlete. But with Froome, like multiple wins of the tour and every Grand Tour, and obviously these guys that have won, the guys that can sort of do it have done it time and time and time again. You have to, when you do it yourself and you can't even do it once.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
easier. It's easier to dream about trying to do it once when you've never done it than what it is trying to dream about doing it four times or three times
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I
you
remember
know,
Noel Donaldson, coach of both Hamish and Jimmy and Drew. He'd said that
yeah.
you basically didn't even get an opinion on rowing until you'd won two Olympic gold medals.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, great. So I'm like 6 years
Mm-hmm.
away from even
Yeah, yeah,
having an opinion on this sport that I'm spend all of my waking hours thinking about. So that's great.
yeah,
Didn't have a lot of talent for this to begin with, so we'll do what we can with what we have,
yeah,
which is all you can
yeah,
do.
yeah.
Wurfy, really appreciated your time, mate, and I wish you all the best for the season ahead and the season after that and the season after that, and however long it takes for you to wring the towel dry and to get out of not only this sport but get out of sport what you want. And I can't. There's a short list of people I can think of that have invested as much in sport, and glad that we could benefit from your time and your insights today. I really appreciate it, mate.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Great questions. It's
Great.
definitely a bit different, so it was good. Yeah, good
Good.
to reflect
Good.
on rugby.
All
I
right.
don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Back. It's been a while.
Mm.
So thanks, mate.